today's lesson, we're going to be learning the very basics of CSS, short for Cascading Style Sheets. Let's just jump right in. Here is the bare bones of an HTML file. And before we continue, in this video I'm assuming that you have at least a very basic understanding of HTML, because without HTML, CSS is of no use. So let's just go ahead and add a little bit of sample content to our page inside the body section. Let's start with a heading level 1 element. Let's also add a paragraph. Let's go ahead and save this file and name it index.html. Now I just saved it to a folder on my desktop named Learning CSS. Let's open it and view it in our web browser. Now as you can see, this page looks very dull. Just some black text, there's no layout, no style, no color. It's because you haven't learned CSS yet, and that's what we use to add style. So let's go ahead and add a new line of code in our head section, and let's link to an external style sheet. Let's dissect this code as we go. We're linking to a style sheet. It's located in the same folder as our HTML file, and it's going to be named style.css, and it's CSS. So now that the web browser knows that we want it to look for a file named style.css, we need to create that file. So let's go ahead and create a new file. Now let's take a quick look at our page in the web browser. Let's say we want this heading to be orange. It's an H1 element. So in our CSS file, we're going to start a rule, a CSS rule. We begin by selecting the element, H1. We'll put some curly brackets and we say color orange. Now let's save this file in the same folder as our HTML file, and let's name it style.css. Now let's go refresh our web page. And our H1 element is orange. Now let's go back to our CSS file and dissect the code that we used to make this heading level 1 orange. This entire bit of code is called a CSS rule. It begins with a selector. H1 tells the web browser which element we want to select in style. Next up, color is a property, and orange is the value. Properties and values form to create a declaration. Let's add another declaration. When we save our CSS file and reload our page in the browser, our heading should be aligned center. Now let's go back to our CSS file and add another rule. Let's style the paragraph on the page. P for paragraph, that's the selector. Start the rule with curly brackets. Property, let's increase the font size. 130%. Save our file. Refresh it in our web browser, and the font became larger. Now this method that we just practiced of adding styles to the page is only one of the ways to use CSS to select elements. For example, both of these rules are type selectors. I want to show you a new way, something called an ID selector. Let's go over to our HTML page. Let's wrap this paragraph in a section, and we'll call it intro. Div is basically short for division or section. Now let's add another paragraph below the intro section, and it will simply read, "This is not in the intro section." Now let's say, for example, we want to style this intro section of the page. Since we gave the div, the division, an ID of intro, we can do that very easily. We'll add a rule on our style sheet, #, which is how we select elements that have IDs, and then intro, start our rule. Let's give the intro section a background color of yellow. When we save our page, and we also make sure to save our index page, and refresh it in our web browser, the first paragraph, the intro section, has a yellow background. So now we've learned two different ways to select elements with CSS. The first is where you just type the name of an element, and the second is an ID selector. Let's learn a third way called a class selector. Let's add some more content to our HTML page to illustrate how to use a class selector. Let's add a few more paragraphs. This is the second paragraph in the important section. Let's also create a second paragraph down here. This is the second paragraph not in the important section. Now, with ID selectors, you can only assign an ID to one element. That's why we need a class selector. A class you can assign to as many elements as you want. So let's imagine we wanted to style the first paragraph in this section and then the first paragraph down here a certain way. They can share a common class. Class equals first. Class equals first. Let's go over our style sheet. Now, similar to an ID selector, a class selector begins with a period and then the name of the class. So first, begin our rule. Let's style our page so the first paragraphs are larger. Font size 200%. So we save our CSS file. We save our HTML file. Refresh our web browser. And the two paragraphs that have the class of first are larger. So now we've learned three different types of CSS selectors: type selectors, ID selectors, and class selectors. Now let's go ahead and learn a fourth type of selector called a descendant selector. Let's look at our page in the web browser. Imagine that we wanted our first paragraph only in the intro section to be red. Let's write a rule to achieve this. So we start out by selecting the intro element. Then inside that we want to select the first class. And then we write our declaration. Color red. Save our CSS file. Refresh our page. And it's red. Let's dissect how we did that. Intro highlights, or selects rather, this chunk of the code. We add a space and then we add the class, and it narrows the search down even further. Then it selects only the first class inside the intro. Now what's fun is you can select as many levels deep as you need to. So let's imagine that the word paragraph was wrapped in an EM element. Let's imagine we wanted to style only that section of the code. Let's imagine that this was also an EM, just to distinguish the two EMs. Start out by selecting the intro, then first, and then inside that paragraph we want to style the EM element, and we'll say color green. Save our file, refresh our web page. You can see that the EM made this italic as well as this, but only this one was green. And that's thanks to the power of descendant selectors. And that's it for today's lesson. Let's do a quick recap. We learned how to link to an external style sheet. We learned the basic structure and syntax of CSS. A rule begins with a selector, a property, and a value. They create a declaration. You can string together as many as you want. Just add a semicolon in between. And you learned 4 of the most basic CSS selector types. So you can actually do quite a lot. And that's a wrap. Stay tuned for more CSS lessons. Thank you.